Good evening. Demonfield Comics in Moore, New Jersey here. Got another interview for you this evening. And if you will, yet once again, if you are here, please hit that share button. Let's go ahead and get some people in the audience on this one. This is going to be an interesting evening tonight. I have got a great guest on here. You're definitely going to want to have some questions that are going to be available on this. I'm not even going to get into all of the accolades that he has done in the past. We will get into that as soon as I bring him up, because if I do that, I'm going to be hoarse and dry mouth and everything, because he's got a ton of stuff that he's done and worked on, and he's very good at it. So let's go ahead and give this just a moment longer to go ahead and get some more shares in here if we can, and then I will bring him out. Hope everyone is having a great evening tonight, staying safe, wash your damn hands. And whenever you do come in here, if you will just comment, let us know that you can actually hear us, see us, all that kind of fun stuff. And again, appreciate y'all going and being in here again tonight for yet another interview. I am doing as many of these as I possibly physically can on this, kind of over pushing myself to some degree on here, but you know what? Worth it. I will sleep whenever I'm dead. All right, we are right at that time. I am actually going to go ahead and bring out the guest now. Oh, Greg Harms is in here. Hey, Greg, what's up, buddy? Eve, welcome to the show. Thank y'all for showing up. If you will, please share this out. Let's go ahead and get some more in the audience if we can. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start the opening on this. Tonight, my guest is Mike A. Barron. Like I said, the accolades for this man are way too many for me to list. So whenever I do bring him out, we're going to kind of go over that as well. But he got my attention. There was a online con where I had him as a guest. I was co-hosting on there, and he amazed me with what he's doing, with the way he was promoting some books and the way he was going through some things. And yes, he actually even does books, which is even greater than that. So we're going to delve into that. We're actually going to pick the brain of Michael A. Barron. Let me go ahead and bring him out right now. Hey, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hey, appreciate you being here. Like I was telling everyone just before you got on here, you have got a lot of accolades going for you. I wasn't even going to attempt to go into all that. So if you'll kind of share with us some of the things that you've worked on.
Well, I broke into comics in 1981 with Nexus with my co-creator, Steve Rude. I had always wanted to write stories my whole life. I wanted to be a writer. And we were lucky to be in the right place at the right time, which was the home of Capital City Distribution, the second largest comic distributor in the world, a huge multi-million-dollar corporation. And they decided they wanted to publish their own comics. So we showed them the 12 pages of Nexus that we did together. And they said, yeah, let's fly with it. We were off and running. They did 3 oversized black and white issues. The third one contained a flexi disc with a cast reading of the comic you were looking at. And after that, they turned to color. And Capital put out 6 color issues before they realized they didn't know what they were doing. But the character was so popular that other publishers expressed interest, and we eventually went with First Comics. I had also created the Badger for Capital Comics. And for people who don't know, Nexus is a reluctant executioner of mass murderers 500 years in the future. And the Badger is a multiple personality, only one of whom is a costume superhero. Badger has no superpowers, but he can communicate with animals at a level no other human being can. The other personalities were a grab bag of different types, because personalities arise in a multiple as the multiple needs them to deal with various crises. Because most multiple personalities are formed by awful childhood circumstances. But anyhow, so first started publishing Nexus and Badger. And because of that, I attracted the attention of some editors at Marvel and DC. Carl Potts asked me to write The Punisher, which I did for 5 years. And at DC, Mike Gold asked me to write The Flash, which I did for only 1 year because I ran out of ideas. That wouldn't happen to me today. I'm a different writer, but I was young and foolish back then, and I let it go. But I went on to write many other titles, including Dead Man, Star Wars for Dark Horse. I worked for Valiant. I did Archer and Armstrong, some Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. Shadow Man was the supernatural title. And then I fell out of comics for a period of about 10 years, during which I moved from Wisconsin to Colorado. And it was in Colorado that I returned to writing novels, which I'd always wanted to do. I set out to write novels, but it took me 30 years to learn how to write a novel because I'm a slow learner. But when I got it, I got it. And now I have a whole bunch of novels in print, most of them through Wolfpack Publishing, which I just joined recently. They specialize in men's fiction, primarily Westerns, hard-boiled thrillers, and international espionage. And I have 7 books out in the Biker series. Josh Pratt's a reformed motorcycle hoodlum who went to prison and found God and came out determined to turn his life around. And if you're familiar with Raymond Chandler or Jack Reacher or Travis McGee, who was my original inspiration, you'll know the type. He's a rough-hewn guy with one foot in civility and the other foot in the outlaw world. Kind of a court of last resort when you've exhausted all other forms of getting justice and nothing's working. The lawyer isn't working. The law isn't working. You go to Josh and you tell him your problems, and he's a soft touch for a sob story. And he'll take you up on it. The stories are pretty brutal. Some of them deal with motorcycle gangs, but most of them do not. It's just the character that Josh is. He's kind of a fish out of water. About a year ago, I conceived a Florida Man comic, and I contacted some people about it, most notably my artist Todd Mulrooney. And we were just talking, and nothing was happening. But by the time I'd written 5 issues of the comic, I realized I had a very detailed outline for a novel. So I wrote the novel, and I showed it to my publisher at Wolfpack, and a month later it was in print. He loved it, and it's by far my most popular novel. And I just turned in the sequel, Florida Man 2, and now we're about to launch the Florida Man Kickstarter. And if you see my stuff on Facebook or Twitter, it's all over the place. You can't hide from it. I sent you a whole bunch of art from it.
Oh, yes.
But at the same time, I'm always working on 2 or 3 projects at once. The other project which I'm excited about is the Nexus novel, which Dark Horse was originally going to publish. But when this coronavirus thing hit, just like every other publisher, they went pencils down and they tabled all their publication plans because who knows what tomorrow's gonna bring. And in a crisis like this shows it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it shows that in a crisis where you're worried about living and your food supply, comics seem ephemeral. They don't seem that important. On the other hand, as Churchill said, what are we fighting for? We're fighting for the legacy of Western civilization, the arts, the literature, and yes, comic books.
Absolutely. I completely agree on that. It's comic books are, I mean, whenever all said and done, if it was to end tomorrow, artwork is going to be the form of currency that everybody's going to want anyway. So there you go. So you want to have as much as you can, but also you want to keep that grounding, that foundation of having that level of, I'm trying to think of the word exactly I'm looking for on here. It's being creative, but it's above that. It's not just the creativity, it's going a step further. And that's what I see in a lot of especially with the indies, is you see a lot of that in there. Now, I've seen a lot of that in your work because you mentioned with the Punisher. Honestly, who doesn't like the Punisher?
Well,
and you did it for 5 years.
Like the Punisher, but they're not comic.
Well, okay, there you go, exactly. But it's one of those things that as long as you're putting the passion in there, it takes that creativity level to a whole different level on it, because you're not only just putting words to paper with art, you're actually putting emotions to words to paper to art, which is, going a step with that. And I've seen you do that with your works that you've done. Now that bringing up, I actually have your homepage actually on my computer right behind here. I wanted to bring up a couple of things if you don't mind,
Please.
because you were going through some of the accolades, and I saw some that I wanted to go ahead and bring up. So we have got he named about the Flash, the Punisher, Dead Man, Star Wars, but we also had some of the written publications that you've done for Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine,
I did have
Cream
a story in
Fusion.
Ellery Queen, and I'd love to turn that into a short film. It would be dynamite.
Exactly. I mean, there is so much. Honestly, I always do my homework before I have someone on here. And whenever you gave me this, of course, I had gone over it whenever you first gave it to me, and I'm going over it before I had you on this evening. And I'm looking through going, there is no way that I'll be able to remember all of this to go ahead and bring you out. That's why I had you give your accolades, because there is a ton of stuff on here, and it's things that you recognize. I mean, just randomly going through here, Robotech graphic novel Genesis.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge.
I was looking at some of the original art to that today.
Conan the Savage.
I did one story
There's
with Vale Myerick, who's one of my favorite collaborators.
and then we've got a ton of Punisher on here. Crossroads. You actually did something from Crossroads?
Well, those are the first crossover books. There was a Badger John Sable,
Oh, okay.
a Nexus Grimjack, I think, or was it? No, it was a Nexus. It was. Who created John Sable? Mike.
Oh, I know
You know,
that
he's
one.
in my phone book. I should look it up. Is it Mike Grill? Mike Grill,
Okay, yes.
and Mike had another science fiction character but you know, that was like 40 years ago. I'd have to go burrowing through my collection. I did come across some of those books the other day because I'm always rummaging around the basement. People ask for stuff, and I have no organized system, so I have to go through every box to find it.
But see, that's kind of my point, is that you've been going through this for, like you said, 40 years or so. And yes, you had a hiatus of, you said, 10 years in between, but you're still hitting it pretty hard even nowadays. And you're doing more of the indie things that you're doing nowadays, more so than the mainstream. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the work I'm doing I can't discuss because it hasn't been released yet, but I'm working with a number of publishers who've asked me to write their stories. You know about Offworlder. We can talk about
Yes.
Offworlder because that's been out there for a couple of months, and it's the book that won't die. I mean, the second crowdfunder failed, but we're going to launch it again because, as you've seen, I mean, anybody who goes to that Indiegogo page and looks at the art, their jaw's going to hit the floor.
Yes, definitely. And it's not just the artwork, it's the way that the panels are done, the flow. And I'm only seeing a few pages at a time. I'm not even seeing the entire book at this point, and I'm already salivating going, okay, I've got to see more of this. I got to know what's going on. So it definitely needs to happen. Like I told you before, I'm going to make sure that does happen. I'm going to be working with you on that one.
Thank you, Phil.
So for those who don't know you, where do they find you? We'll go ahead and lead with that before we start getting into the other questions on here, just so they know where they can start looking up and finding you on things.
Well, my website's Twitter, at Bloody Red Baron. Website, bloodyredbaron.com. But for others who are interested, I would just say go to Amazon and type my name in, Mike Baron. That's all you have to do.
That is incredibly true, too, because, yes, I did do that, because after you gave me one of the links for Florida Man on Amazon, I just started looking because it linked me to your name directly on there. And there's a ton of stuff to go ahead and look through on there. Now, we've kind of gone through some of the comic credentials that are on here. I wanted to go through some of your novels. I've actually got your homepage again. Normally, I would be able to memorize some of this. My memory, I'm getting older, so the memory is not that good, and you've got a lot of stuff. So
welcome to the party, pal.
Just bear with me. Now, I'm looking at the novels, and the first thing that pops out at me is Witchblade Demons. So you did a Witchblade novel?
Yeah. That was a long time ago. That was probably my first novel.
Wow. I mean, that's it shows on here 2003. So that was that actually a Mark Silvestri style that you were doing on there, or was it
I
a
think
whole
Mark
different
did the
rendition
I
of
think
it?
Mark did the cover, but I understood the character, and I had pretty much free reign to write a story around that character, and it was well received at the time. But at that time, I was just still feeling my way into the world of novels, and I was pretty sure I nailed it, but I knew I could do better. But I'm very proud of the book, and I'm glad it came out.
Oh, I would love to see it. I'm gonna have to look into that one. And then going down the list, I'm just kind of going through here. You've got a Star Wars Omnibus X-Wing Rogue Squadron Volume One.
Yep, those were just
Now for Star Wars fans, that's pretty flippin' huge.
it was. But the proudest work I've done in Star Wars was adapting Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy.
Nice. That's
Timothy
definitely
Zahn.
something in there.
Timothy Zahn is now going to distribute his own books.
Really?
Yeah. And Timothy, of
Okay.
course, is one of the iconic Star Wars authors, along with my
Right.
other publisher, Kevin J. Anderson.
Nice. Very nice. Now, the next one I'm going to bring up, and I know is Russell still in the audience? Because if Russell's still in here, I'm going to go ahead and apologize ahead of time for the comments he's going to come up with on this one, because I just know how Russell is. I want to bring it up, though, because this is what got my interest going and saying, look, I've got to get him on in an interview at some point. We got to start talking about his writing and how he does things. You have a novel that's called Helmet Head. Russell, let that sink in for just a moment. Now, the thing is, I want you to give me that famous pitch on Helmet Head that you love doing, because that's the thing that got me right there. Is what is your very elegant pitch that you put out there for Helmet Head?
Nazi biker zombies.
And there it is. I'm telling you right now. Okay, Helmet Head novel, and you walk up to Michael's table and you're like, hey, what is this novel about? And he looks at you and he says, Nazi biker zombies. Now, how much more do you need to know past that? Because
that's
at that
a rare
point,
book. That's a rare book because of the way you can sell it. And you can't do that with most books. Most books you have to provide a little more context and story, but that one kind of sells itself. And I'm going to send you some art. We've been working on this comic book forever. And it might see print now, because the original publisher who came in and offered to do it is suddenly rolling in dough. And let's see if I can find that color comic. We have a color version. There it is. There it is. All right. It's on your Facebook page on the PM.
that's what I'm going to right now. And then let's go back. And there we go. That is cool.
Well, it's something. It's certainly a good horror cover.
Well, I mean, but in what you just said, Nazi biker
zombies.
zombies.
Nazi biker zombies.
It actually, I'm looking at it right now going, okay, yes, that's check, and check. So all three pieces right there on the cover.
Right.
So it definitely is one of those that sells itself, but that actually kind of brings in what I wanted to talk to you about with your writing on how the style is and things of that nature, because you actually had, I was doing some research on your YouTube feeds that you had on there, and you had an online writing course, and we kind of briefly discussed this prior to the interview, but you were doing that and you're thinking about going ahead and revamping that for people that are interested. If you can kind of tell them what that's about, so that people will know.
Well, I have a whole syllabus I worked up. I haven't looked at it for a while, but my approach to novel writing is my own. Although I've studied a great many good novelists, and I've read a lot of books on novel writing. And what I like about my approach is it's very simple. And I'll give you some examples. The first lesson is, what is your story about? And when somebody asks you that question, you have to be prepared. You can't hem or haw. You have to work on it beforehand and come up with something that's appealing, that people want to hear, so that when they hear that, they say, yeah, now I got to read the book. And here's an example. We have a book out called Cue Ball, which looks like it's going to get picked up, although we crowdfunded it and distributed it and fulfilled it. And it's a great book. But here's what Cue Ball is about. Detroit homeboy Curtis Ball joined the Merchant Marine and ended up managing a warehouse in Manila. Curtis wanted only two things out of life: to see the world and study Kali Eskrima. But when a pack of tuxedoed sharks muscle their way into his warehouse, Chris learns the hard way that it's not always smart to mind your own business. The spooks are looking for Donna Wing, a beautiful Chinese blogger, forced to flee due to her exposés of child organ trafficking. Now Curtis and Donna are on the run from the Chinese government, the Tongs, and a group of international cutthroats who will stop at nothing to stop them from reaching the United States and spilling their guts. Sometimes you have to spill some guts to spill your guts. And that's what Cue Ball is about. It's a martial arts espionage thriller.
And that right there is what I'm talking about, because with you just doing that right there, if I were standing in front of the table, you start getting, and I've been in retail management for like 29 plus years. So as long as you get the customer to stand in front of you and start getting that head bob going, oh yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. The more you get that forward motion of the head, they're locked. I mean, it's just like fishing. It's, you got that hook right there. You just go ahead and say, yank, and we're done. We got you.
Which brings me to some of my more theories about writing, which is, it's my goal to grab the reader by the throat and drag them into the narrative to the exclusion of all else. I want a reader who's committed. I want a reader who can't wait to find out what happens next, because that's the essential question in all fiction. What happens next? Well, how do you get a reader to do that? Well, it's a combination of many things. It's the narrative voice, it's the plot, it's the characters themselves. I subscribe to the theory that the reader wants to identify with the protagonist. He wants a protagonist to win, and he wants to cheer that protagonist on because the protagonist is good at some level. Mm-hmm. Now, I deal with a lot of anti-heroes. They're not squeaky clean. They don't know which fork to use for dinner, but their hearts are good. And as a writer, I've set out 3 rules for myself. I don't know if these apply for other writers, but there are things to keep in mind. Number 1 is it's the writer's duty to entertain. And you'd think that would be obvious, but to a lot of writers, it's not obvious. A lot of writers get a chip on their shoulder, or they got a speech they want to make, or a lecture or something, and they devote everything to the service of their message. And it's a couple of examples of that are Ayn Rand with Atlas Shrugged, or The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck, mm-hmm. or To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Now, Harper Lee and John Steinbeck achieved because they're great writers, and they didn't forget the first rule. And Ayn Rand, I don't know, she had some great ideas, and I like a lot of her ideas, but I've read Atlas Shrugged, and it does not exactly grab the reader by the throat. The second rule I have is to show, don't tell, which would seem to be obvious, especially for somebody working in comics, but it applies equally to prose, to straight prose mm-hmm. fiction. And the example is, you can say John was a bad man, or you can say John was walking down the street when a starving dog came out of the alley, sat at his feet, wagged his tail, looked at him with hungry eyes. John kicked the dog and walked on. So you show that John is a bad man. And the third rule is to be original. And that's not that difficult if you allow your own voice and you find your own voice, because we're all unique human beings and we all bring our own life experience to whatever it is that we're writing. It creeps in. As I mentioned before, I was inspired to write by John D. MacDonald, who created Travis McGee. And to me, Travis McGee was the quintessential tarnished knight, which is what Raymond Chandler called Philip Marlowe. Down these mean streets, a tarnished knight must go. And all of those books were written in the first person, which means that everything we learn in the story, every impression is filtered through Travis McGee's point of view. Mm-hmm. I sometimes use the first person, but I favor the third person. And what we like about Travis McGee is not just his point of view, but his morality, which seeps in. I don't know if you've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Have you seen mm-hmm. it? Yeah, it's a great movie. I've seen it a couple of times. And one thing we know about Cliff, the stunt man, is he's a good man. And we learn that when he picks that hitchhiker up on the
Mm-hmm.
way to the Spawn movie ranch. And she throws herself down in his lap and says, "Do you want a blowjob?" And he says, "How old are you?" And then everything that happens at the Spawn movie ranch reinforces the view of this guy, that he's got a rigid moral code and he's basically a decent guy, except for that flashback when he's on his boat. You know, he killed his wife, don't you? And Cliff's sitting there with that spear gun. His wife is standing up there cursing him out.
Yeah, it's definitely the way that you write something can definitely affect the outcome of the book, because there are some people that will say, as long as you can go ahead and read it without any lettering on there and it grabs you and you know what's going on, then it's been done well, and then the writing will accent it, which, if done correctly, that is a perfect merriment right there that will work. But there are a lot of times whenever you see a dark alley, you need to know how dark it actually is. I mean, and the lettering can come in there and you can actually write something on there to actually make you feel what's going on instead of
Well, you're
just
talking
reading
about
it. Now you're a
comics,
part
right?
of it. Exactly. Yes.
Well, my view that wordless comics are a waste of time, and they can be beautiful, but no matter how beautiful they are, you flip through them and you say, "Wow, what great art!" But words can enhance that story if you use them to reveal character or a worldview that's compelling. We've all seen comics that are overwritten. In fact, most comics are overwritten and I know because I was a comic writer, and when I was young, I always felt pressure to add words to any panel, even when the panel perfectly showed what needed to be shown, which brings us back to show don't tell. And Pete Brandvold is kind of one of my gurus. He's a Western writer, and he said, "Mike, you got to think of a novel as a movie, and that is that if this were being done as a movie, how would they transmit this information? Would they have a
Mm-hmm.
guy look at you and explain what was going on, or would they show what's going on?" Now, there's a show on TV now called Better Call Saul. It's one of my favorite shows. It's a spinoff from Breaking Bad. And
Mm-hmm.
most of those shows begin with a long wordless sequence that hooks you because you're interested. You want to know what's going on. And when the sequence ends, you say, "Oh, that's what they're doing. That's what's going on." And that's a good example of showing, not telling.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's basically it's fishing. I mean, it's exactly what it is. I mean, you can go out and you can fish with dynamite, and you can get the readers for that one off and that one time, or you can go ahead and reel them in and hook them, one by one, and just keep them coming back for more, because they'll keep coming back to that same pond every single time. So it's definitely, it's one of those things where if you go fishing, if you go fishing, then you'll actually hook them and you'll be able to bring them in and keep them there. So you keep your audience. And that kind of brings up on, how do you keep your readers interested? I mean, I know the pitch, getting them there and all, but how do you actually keep them where, whenever you've got them hooked, how do you keep them there?
Every part of the book has to be interesting. There can't be any dull patches. Well, what do you do when you have two talking heads? Well, you can make that dialogue lively and entertaining. Avoid cliches. It's always better to come up with your own language. And we all have our own language from our childhood, from things we said with friends, little phrases we carry around in our heads. And most of them have not been used before. There are certain, you never want to say, "I don't think we're in Kansas anymore." You never want to say, "We have to talk." You
Mm-hmm.
never want to say, "People move it." Why? Because those phrases have been used a million times, and we've all seen them. So you want to come up with your own language. And if language isn't necessary, just show it visually what has to be done. If you show a
Mm-hmm.
dinosaur bursting into the room, then you show the people reaction. They're all freaked out. Then you show them running out the door through the windows. Uh, you don't have to say a dinosaur bursts into the room.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's, it's exchanging to where you have the emotion that's going on instead of just reading. You have to be able to immerse yourself in whatever you're reading at that point. And a
Exactly.
good writer will go ahead and draw you in enough to do so.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I know what you're saying on that. Yeah, that's definitely. I know that one author that just keeps coming to my mind that was influential whenever I was younger, Dragon Tears by Dean Koontz. I read that book. It took me almost overnight, and I read the entire thing. And it was a pretty good sized book. One thing, it's based on where I was born. So he was like talking about the exact city and everything where I was born in California. So that was huge for me. On another thing, whenever he would start going into like he would be doing this whole chapter based on what was going on, and then all of a sudden the next chapter was about, and it was a short chapter, of course, but it was the dog. You were in the dog's brain. The dog was like, I'm hungry. I want to drink from this bowl. This bowl's not clean. I want to get another bowl. Why can't I have another bowl? I need to go to the restroom, but he's not opening the door. Can I just do right here? But I got smacked last time. It was hilarious, but it was also one of those things where I'm sitting there going, I feel like I need to scratch a flea or something. I'm actually a dog now.
Yeah, Dean loves his dogs.
Oh, definitely. I think they're in every single one of his novels that he's got. But yeah, it's whenever you can actually convey that kind of emotion directly into what you're reading, and you start feeling what's going on, that's whenever you know that you've gotten it right. And I know with some of your stuff, I haven't read. I need to get one of your novels and actually look at it. So I apologize. I'm working on that, but I need to do that because I want to see exactly how you're doing that as well. Because if you're able to go ahead and take me out of the world that I'm in and put me directly into your world while I'm in between those pages, then again, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing on there, and it conveys that message.
I had a great writer. His name was Jerry McNeely, and he said, you make them laugh a little bit, you make them cry a little bit, you scare the hell out of them, and that's entertainment.
That is very true. That is very true. Now, what is something that you have not worked on that you are aspiring to work on?
Well, really, I love my own creations the best. I mean, every parent loves their own children the best. I can't say I haven't worked on Florida Man because the novel's been out for 6 months now, and I just turned in the sequel. But I'm excited about the comic we're doing. I don't know if you've seen any of the art I've been posting, but it's pretty phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
Todd is just exploding on that. I have ideas I've been carrying with me for years that I've been coming back to, and one is a big historical novel. Another is Kung Fu Musical, which just popped into my head, Kung Fu Musical. But right now I'm working on the 8th Josh Pratt novel. I have written a Badger novel. I will go back and edit it. And I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I may publish it myself as I am with the Nexus novel. I've written a couple of Westerns. The next one to appear is called Curse of the Black Rose. It's about an order of killer nuns on the Mexican border in the early 20th century. That's right, killer nuns. Not my idea. I'm just playing in Richard Prosh's meadow. Richard Prosh is a well-known Western writer who created this series, but I'm very happy to do it, and I'm proud of the book.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's another one of those things. If I'm at your table and I'm looking around, I'm like, did you know what I was looking for before I even stepped up here? What is going on? Because it grabs you by the throat. I mean, so I see why you would want to work on something like that, because it's one of those things that just the title alone will grab you. You put the story in between the pages there, and then you've got someone that's going to stick with you and go ahead and start following you and following everything you do from then on.
Whenever I'm presented a project like that, they send me a large Bible outlining all the characters, their motivations, the settings, the time, and I work up a detailed outline. And when I worked up this outline, I was excited about it. It has a lot to do with bullfighting. And when I'm excited about it, the reader will be excited about it. And I always say the writer always has to surprise himself before he can surprise the reader. But I also believe in a detailed outline ahead of time. And the outline has to act as an advertisement for the book itself. I want to hand that outline to someone, and when they start reading the outline, I don't want their eyes to glaze over. I want them to rush to the end and say, where's the book?
Exactly. Now, there was another novel that was on here that I saw, and it was Banshees.
Banshees. I'm very proud of Banshees. It's a big, sprawling horror novel about a satanic rock band that comes back from the dead. It's also available as an audio book, too. And Kevin J. Anderson published that through Wordfire Press. And if you like Stephen King, if you like The Stand, if you like Robert R. McCammon, I think you'll like this. Everybody who's read it has loved it. But, it's not widely known because Wordfire Press is a boutique publisher. And Kevin
Right.
pays for the editing and the proofreading and setting the type and getting it into production, but there's no advertising budget. And I'm the world's worst self-promoter. But I do put that up. I've written 3 horror novels, of which I'm extremely proud. The second one is Scorpio. It's about a ghost who only appears under a blazing sun, and that will grab you by the throat. And the third is Domain, and it's a haunted house story. In fact, it's the haunted house story to end all haunted house stories.
Interesting. And those are available also through Amazon?
They're all
Is that
on
where we
Amazon.
get those?
Yeah, they're all on. Here, I'll show you the titles. Let me get the Scorpio here first. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. But that's the cover illustration. Let me show you the book title cover. That Jordi Armengol did that cover. He's the artist on Offworlder.
Okay, I got the cover over here. Give me just a minute, guys, because that's why my jaw just dropped here. But yeah, we're getting the rest of it.
There it is.
All right. So let me go ahead and bring this over so we can see it. And there it is. If you can see that, that is Scorpio. Now that is the trade dress right there. This is the, that's so you can see it a little bit better because it comes out much larger.
Yeah, that's Jordi's.
That alone, yeah, that alone interests me immensely. And then, now is it, how long is the book?
It's about 85,000 words.
Okay.
I don't know how many pages that is. That's what most of my novels are. They're good, decent, full-length novels. Banshees is over 100,000. It's the longest book I've ever written, and I could probably do it again if I had a big enough subject. But I generally tend to write about the 80 to 90,000 word length.
It looks very cool, and I know it sounds very cool on that. And you said about the, what was the last one that you said, the horror book to end all horror books?
Domain. I just sent you the cover. It's on your Facebook feed.
Let me see. Oh, that was slow coming up. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I got to show that one. Hang on a sec.
And this is based on a real house.
Nice. And again, it's one of those things where the cover grabs you by the throat, and then I'm sure the rest of the story does the exact same thing, just won't let go.
Oh, yeah. I love horror. Those are my, well, Helmet Head 2 is a horror novel.
Right.
But right now my head is cleared of horror. I got those out of my system. I'm sure that I will write another one when I get a good idea. But right now I'm focused on the 8th Josh Pratt novel and a couple of other projects that I can't discuss.
No, we're not going to push you, I promise.
Well, it's just because they're not my projects. I'm writing somebody else's story, and it's up to them to reveal that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So as far as, I mean, I know you've done the novels, the comics on there. Is there a favorite that you've done of either one that really sticks out for you?
Well, in my comic work, I'm proudest of my Nexus series, and the whole thing is available from Dark Horse in 12 hardbound volumes and 12 much cheaper Treasury editions. As far as my novels go, I love the Josh Pratt series, and I love Florida Man. I love my horror novels. You know, if I think that I've done a good job, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm. So what has been your most challenging work that you've had to do?
Well, you know, a lot of it is stuff that never panned out. I get contacted by people and they want this and they want that, and they promise all sorts of riches down the road, and I work and I work and I turn it in, and then the funding evaporates or they go away into the woodwork, and I never with that. It's not so much challenging, but it's more challenging than my own stuff because I have to adapt to whatever it is that they want, be it a biography or a book of poems.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I set myself my own greatest challenges every time I sit down to write. You know, I was stalled for the longest time on this latest Josh Pratt novel. I just couldn't find my way in. But the other day I found my way in, and now I'm excited about it. Uh, if you know, if you're writing and you're excited about what you're writing, it's working. But if you're forcing the words to come, you got to stop and back away from the typewriter. And one thing,
Freddie has to make an appearance.
this is Freddie. This is my wife Ann, and I would be lost without her. She ran the Cue Ball Kickstarter, and she's going to be running the Nexus novel Kickstarter. You got that Nexus novel cover, right? You
Yes.
want me to send it to you again?
I believe I've got it on here. Give me just a moment.
Because that I'm really proud of that Nexus novel. I think
Yes,
that
I've got it right here.
I think that anybody who's not even read the comic, if they just pick that novel up cold, they're going to be hooked.
All right, so here is the Nexus novel. And that's the entire jacket. That's the front and the back, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, see, that is gorgeous on there. And you can see some of his other works that are back there as well. Now, that brings up, what is Whack Job?
Whack Job is an idea that I've been carrying with me all my life. And it's about a series of self-immolations of important men and politicians that suddenly explode into flame. And now spontaneous human combustion has been with us ever since man started drawing on the side of a cave. People have believed in spontaneous human combustion, and there are numerous documented cases, which I suppose, being a controversial subject, they could be disproven and proven depending on your predilection. But my explanation for the spontaneous human combustion is so outrageous and completely divorced from anything you're expecting that when it's revealed in the novel, I guarantee your head will explode. I can't give it away, but let me just say this. It's a science fiction novel. It's a science fiction novel. It takes place mostly in Colorado, up and down the Front Range.
Now, I'm going to give you a bit of advice here. If you're going to have heads exploding from reading that, that's not going to keep your attention on people reading all of your stuff. I'm just going to let you know that. It's kind of hard for them to come back and keep reading without a head.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. I mean, I'm pretty sure about that. When you understand what causes it, it's just their jaws are going to hit the floor.
Now, Jim did say, Jim Noble is in here. And
Thanks,
Jim, I didn't tell you hello earlier, but he said, love Nexus.
Thanks, Jim. And I want to thank Greg for pointing out there was Mike Grell I was looking for.
Yes, exactly. That too. Yes, I mean, you got it. And then Greg put that up there shortly there afterwards. That's why I didn't show that one beforehand. But yeah, you've definitely got some interesting works that you're working on there. How many novels do you usually put out per year?
I can write 3 to 4 a year.
Very good. You know, that's very good.
That to me is like I'm just kind of walking briskly along. My friend Peter Brandvold, the Western writer, he probably writes 6 to 7 novels a year, but his novels are short. They're in the 60,000 word range. And if you like Westerns, check out Peter Brandvold, because he's probably the most popular Western writer in the country right now. Now, my friend Kevin J. Anderson, who published Banshees and Scorpio, he publishes at least 500,000 words a year, and he does the Dune sequels, and he's got his own star-spanning sagas that he does all the time. But Kevin has a unique method. He dictates his books while he's hiking through the Rockies. He carries a little tape recorder with him. He's up there above the tree line, the most beautiful country you can imagine, and he's talking about it. And then Duke Zayad went down into the kitchen and began to throw the pots around or whatever. However, and he has somebody transcribe it, and then he edits the transcription. But it's my contention, and we've discussed this, that his manner of writing affects his point of view. And in this way, I prefer a very close personal point of view, where whatever the chapter's happening, you see it through the eyes of one person and their impressions. But Kevin has an omniscient point of view, and that means that in any given scene, he will hop from person to person to person and show what they're all thinking. And it works because it's an omniscient point of view, and you trust him because his narrative voice is so sure. And that's one of the things that contributes to a good reading experience, as well as the plot and the character and the stories, is a seductive narrative voice. And that's what first drew me to Travis McGee and John D. MacDonald. You just dig this guy's worldview, and the way the words come out, you just keep following along. They're like saltine crackers in the forest. You pick one up, and you can pick it up the next one. James Elroy, who wrote L.A. Confidential and The Black Dahlia and many other books, has a unique narrative voice. Have you ever read him?
I have read him, yes, absolutely.
Well, then you know that he writes like a machine gun. Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat. Very few sentences are more than 5 or 6 words long.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's unique because it's derived from the lurid pulps of the 50s that he grew up on, and he uses a lot of alliteration. He loves alliteration. On the other hand, you have Michael Chabon. He wrote a book called Telegraph Avenue about a record store in Berkeley. He's got a chapter in there that's about 5,000 words long, and it's all one sentence. But doesn't flag. You read the whole thing, just like picking up one saltine after another. So
that is impressive.
two extremes of the narrative voice. And most of us stick to the middle of the river.
Oh, absolutely. 5,000 words, one sentence. That just, wow. That I can't even wrap my mind around that one.
Yeah.
That's I know, being in an English class, the teacher used to get upset because she would give us, things where we said, 1,000 words for this, 5,000 words for that, whatever.
And
but
you thought, oh,
I would use, well, no, I would be the one who would actually be like, you know what, I'm in the zone. I'm going to go ahead and write this out, because back then I would actually enjoy writing.
right.
So I would write out 10,000 words, and she would come back and give me like a B for it, but it was perfect. She would give me a B because she said she had to read so much. And I'm like, but I did what I was supposed to. I just overdid. But it does make sense, because she was trying to get me to limit what I'm saying into a smaller amount on there, and I was just not seeing that. It was like my ceiling was, there was no ceiling, and I had to learn that, which was very difficult to learn. Because sometimes whenever you get to going, it's not just what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. So
Absolutely.
Instead of saying how excited this person is to be in this certain situation, I shouldn't have to say it in 3 chapters to get to that point. It should be within, a few paragraph or so, that I can actually convey that kind of message enough to where you're going, all right, I got this. I know where you're going with this. So I learned a valuable lesson from that. But it's definitely something that, you can take it to one extreme or the other. So it's good to stay within the mediums to go ahead and figure out what's most comfortable for you and for your readers as well. Because if you've got the following and all what you do, you want to make sure that they're actually following what you want them to follow on there, how you want them to follow, so that they can see your style definitely in there.
Right. And I don't want to draw attention to my style. That's the last thing I want. I want the reader to have an immersive experience so that he's totally wrapped up in the story. And that's one thing I have about Elroy. I loved his earlier books. I loved everything through The Big Nowhere and L.A. Confidential. But then he became almost a parody of himself. In the last 5 or 6 books that he's written, it's just rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, and they have these huge labyrinthine plots that it's hard to wrap your mind around. And I just wasn't enjoying them that much. And I started several, and I'd get halfway through, and I'd put them down. And I'll do that with a novel. I'll get 3/4 of the way through, and if I get to the point of saying, I don't buy this, or come on, then that book's gone, and it's on to the next book. You have to want to know what happens next, and that's the whole trick to the novelist's game.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you this. For anybody who wants to get into writing, because I know there's a lot of things going with the current situation outside and all that we're trying to do things that maybe we haven't touched in a while, that we haven't gotten into, that, and some people are going into their drawing, their writing, whatever hobbies they didn't get into. For anybody that's getting into their writing again, what's the best piece of advice that you can possibly give them?
Well, the first and most important piece of advice is sit your ass in the chair and work at it. I have a theory that every writer has a million words of bullshit clogging up his system before he gets to the good stuff. So you have to work at it. You have to spend time in that chair. Now, I think there are a lot of exceptions to this, like Richard Price, uh, 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 To Kill a Mockingbird, who wrote Harper Lee. She
Harper Lee,
wrote
yeah.
that when she was in her 30s. And the person who wrote The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, she wrote that when she was 24, 25. And William Styron, who wrote Sophie's Choice and The Confessions of Nat Turner, among other things. His first book, When I Lay Dying, he wrote that when he was in 20s. And so there are such things as natural talents, and I hate them.
There's nothing wrong with that. Well, if anyone's got any questions, go ahead and get those ready. We're going to go ahead and bring those up into the comments if anybody has anything in here. If you're thinking about doing any writing, or you have been doing some writing and you want any kind of advice or anything, this is the man to go ahead and ask right here. So if you've got anything, go ahead and bring that up. We have got just a little bit here before we go ahead and shut this down. I want to go ahead and make sure everyone has a chance to go ahead and ask anything they do want to ask. But I've definitely enjoyed having you here this evening. We've gotten to know a lot more about some of the better practices in dealing with writing, which I personally appreciate. You being with us on here and learning about that.
If I don't recommend many books on writing, but one book is essential to all writers. It's Elements of Style by Strunk and White. It's been out for 75 years. You can buy it on Amazon for like 50 cents or something. It takes an hour to read. And I would advise any would-be writer to get that book.
Absolutely. I will definitely get that information from you sent to me whenever we're done as well. And Jim Noble asked, who are your favorite artists to work with?
Well, Steve Rude was my main man for so many years. Bill Reinhold is one of my favorite artists. There's a Canadian artist named Neil Hansen who also goes by the name of Spider that I would love to work with again, and we're looking into that. Vale Myerick is a longtime collaborator and an amazing artist, just an amazing artist. Kelly Jones was a great artist. I worked with him on Dead Man. I've just had the privilege of working with a lot of terrific artists. Jordi Armengol is another one. Right now I'm working with Todd Mulrooney. He's my artist on Florida Man, and Todd has just been turning into a monster before my eyes.
Those are definitely some big names on there. So yeah, it's and a lot of times him bringing that up actually brings up kind of a question here as well. There's a thing with artists and writers and creators that you actually have to have that symmetry on there. So are you able to go ahead and equate to that symmetry whenever you have any kind of artist that'll go in there, or are you kind of picky about who you deal with on that?
Well, if I like the person's art, I'm willing to work with them. The way I write now, I used to draw each page out by hand with crude little stick figures and all the dialogue and captions. Editors and artists loved it because you could see at a glance what was going on. My art is good enough to tell the story. It's certainly not professional. But now I write full script, but even my scripts are very concise, and I work on the scripts to pare them down. There's nothing extraneous in the script. I give the description, panel 1, page 1, panel 1, horizontal, night, exterior, a lonely roadhouse in the southern Illinois hills, 4 choppers parked in front, lights gleaming from inside, voices from within, and then you go on to the dialogue.
Exactly, because that way you actually convey the exact location, the time, the lighting, everything that needs to be in there. So that way there's no questions about how it needs to be drawn, so you don't have that many edits to do afterwards. And that's always a good thing because nobody likes edits.
I like invisible edits.
Those are the best kind right there. Now, I was going to bring up a point on there because Jim says that's how he writes. So he actually does that as well. So there you go. And Jim has been pumping out a ton of stuff here lately. He's got a whole bunch of stuff on his plate. I know of some of it myself, but I know that he was planning on having a little bit of a hiatus for a little while. That did not happen, and he is more than happy with not having a hiatus now. So,
Jim, contact me on Twitter at Bloody Red Baron. I want to see what you're writing.
Oh, there you go, Jim. So definitely get with him on that one. But yeah, there's definitely, you can convey exactly what you need within the way that you go ahead and set it up. So is it best to always have, if you're going ahead and starting writing on that, is it best to go ahead and do a full outline or just a character diagram, or what would you look at?
Well, everybody works in a different way. Peter Brandvold never writes an outline. He just starts in on the next book. But Peter has an advantage in that every story is based on revenge. And everybody loves a revenge story. I'm trying to think of who wrote Get Shorty. Elmore Leonard. Elmore Leonard is another writer who never outlined. And Elmore could pull it off because he would dive so deeply into his characters and he kept it all in his head. He kept it all balanced. And I used to work that way, but no longer. Now I work out an outline. As I say, the outline is designed as an advertisement for the book itself. And the outline has to get me excited so that I can get excited about the book. And it often does, because I like to write about stuff that excites me. When I get an idea that gets stuck in my head and I think, yeah, that'll make for a compelling story. And that's when I get going. And often the ideas, when you're putting a story together, it often means combining two completely disparate ideas that you never thought would go together. But when they meet, suddenly you have a synergy which propels the story onto a new level. And if you want to know what I mean, I think any one of the biker novels is a good place to start, but also Whack Job because of the revelation.
Okay, absolutely. Now, how do you know whenever you start writing if it's going to be better as a comic or as a novel?
I don't know. As I said, Florida Man started as a comic, and when I was done, I realized I had an extremely detailed outline for a novel, so I wrote it based on the 5 scripts, and it turned out great. But it was that's not a method I recommend, because it was extremely labor intensive to write those 5 scripts, expecting them to be turned into a comic, and then realizing that you wanted to turn them into a novel. Most of my outlines vary from about 5 to 10,000 words. But somebody like Ken Follett, he writes, his outlines go to 100 pages. He's a guy that leaves nothing to chance. Of course, he's very successful. You can't argue with his method. But somebody like Charles Dickens, did Charles Dickens outline? I don't think so. I think Dickens got the idea in his head and he created the characters. And like any good novelist, the characters take on a life of their own and they tell you what they're going to do next.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 2 things before we go ahead and wrap this up. Number one, I'm going to ask the question, do you have a fear of clowns? And the reason I'm asking this is because Jim will be sending you some stuff through Twitter, and I can already tell you it's probably going to have to do with clowns. So I'm just going to make sure.
I see the clowns. I have no fear of clowns. In fact, I once had lunch with Marcel Marceau, and he never stopped talking.
Okay, Jim asks, do you have a comic that you read recently that you really enjoyed? What is your personal favorite comic of all time?
Oh, man. Well, the comic I'm reading right now is Meg, the story of the Megalodon.
Yes.
From Steve Alton's book, and it was drawn by Mike S. Miller and written by J.S. Earls, and I find it very good, very entertaining. And one of the reasons is it's based on a really good adventure novel. So that comic, Meg, is the one that has my attention right now. But when I was getting into comics and I first saw Steranko, I mean, my head exploded. And then the early Barry Smith Conans and Bernie Wrights and Swamp Things, that was all great stuff. The comics
Absolutely.
that I see today are mostly comics from friends and acquaintances with whom I trade comics. They're mostly independent. What little I see of the big two doesn't grab me by the throat these days.
And Jim says straight up he loves the Meg as well. So he's right along with you on that one. I might have to look into that one.
Well, you know, there's a big movie.
Oh, yeah, I've already seen it.
Yeah.
But I'm not as impressed with the movies. I get more immersed in the comics and the books and stuff like that than going to the movies because they usually end very, very poorly.
Well, there are always exceptions. There are movies that are better than the books they're based on. And one is The Godfather.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that goes without question.
Yeah.
that goes definitely without question. But it's good to go ahead and work that creativity in the brain by going ahead and reading and just getting that imagination going on your own sometimes. And then if you want to go ahead and watch the movie afterwards, that's great because then you can go ahead and equate to it, or you can go ahead and say they could have done better, or I really saw it as a different color or a different style or whatever. It's good to see that whenever you do that.
Right.
And Jim said, thank you so much for answering his questions. And we have had a great time with you on here tonight. I hope you have as well. And Eve said on here, your view of the big two is one shared with everyone. Yes, very much so. It's yeah, we've had fun with this. I would look forward to having you again as a future guest on here as well if you're interested in doing so. But we're definitely be watching with your future works that are going to be coming out. And as we spoke about, I'm actually going to be helping you out with that as much as I possibly can to try to get that to where we actually get those out and in people's hands this time, because it's going to happen.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, Offworlder is definitely going to get in your hands. Get ready for that, everybody, because everybody that's here, you need to go ahead and back that whenever it comes out. Share, get everyone else to back it. We need to get it out there. It is a great book. But can you go ahead and give us one last time where we can audibly find you? I've got all the links attached, but if you can go ahead and let everybody know one more time where we can find you.
On Twitter, I'm at Bloody Red Baron. My website is bloodyredbaron.com. I have a Mike Baron Facebook page. I think I'm all full up on Michael A. Baron, but I may not be. I always have a few vacancies. So if you want to send me a friend request there, that's fine. I'm also on Instagram. And if you go to Amazon, just type my name in, Mike Baron, and you'll see a bunch of stuff.
Absolutely. And what I would like to say that everybody that's watching this now and will be watching it later, if you do go and you get his books or a book or anything you want to go ahead and get started with his works, please let us know what you think. Come back and let us know a basic review on it, what you thought about it, how it was written, if your head exploded whenever you read Whack Job. Make sure you clean up the mess before you contact me. Whatever needs to be done, but just let us know, what's going on with that so we can kind of keep up with that along with what everything is going on. But thank you very much for being here, Mike, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you here in the very near future, and hope you had a great time because we did as well. All right, so we had Mike Baron up here. We had a great time with that. We learned quite a few things on here. I always have a closing statement. That's never going to stop as long as y'all are willing to listen to me on this. And every time I have nothing scripted. I mean, there's nothing on the paper that shows this, but I always go based on the interview on what I want to go ahead and close out with. And on this one in particular, I want to go ahead and close out with perseverance. Whenever I asked the question about, what's your advice to go ahead and get started into writing and all, and he said, sit your butt down in front of the desk and do it. That's it. Perseverance. If you go ahead and you decide you want to do something, but it's a great idea up here, but it never gets put into the computer or on paper or however you do it, then it's a great idea that stays up here that no one else gets to enjoy. So sometimes you may think that, the idea that's up there is not good enough for everybody to enjoy. I've been guilty of that myself. Maybe it's time for me to go ahead and step out of that wheelhouse and say, let's give it a shot. You never know. Perseverance. Let's go ahead and see what happens out there. Thank y'all very much for being here this evening. I have enjoyed being your host again for another great interview and looking forward to another one coming up. Y'all have a great evening. Stay safe. Wash your damn hands. Keep it indie, y'all.